So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome once again to our monthly community webinar for prop funders and our wider developer and investor community. Absolutely delighted that so many have actually joined live today for this. For the regular attendees, we do a live session, but we do record it, and a lot of our community actually watch the recording as maybe they're out for a walk or jogging or whatever they do to pass the time, and they can tune in and listen to the pearls of wisdom and the knowledge that comes from our guests and our prop funders team. So, but a really massive thank you to everyone who has joined in. Remember, in terms of housekeeping, if you do have any questions, if you want to make a comment, please, we welcome that. We encourage that, but put it into the Q&A so that we can have a look at that. Brenda and I keep an eye on it, and we'll try and answer your question or read your comment out if we can. And if for some reason we can't or run out of time, we always can come back to you separately. So before we go any further, let me welcome Will from Land Profits. So Will, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
It's good to have you. And I know you had a rather very short notice to be on this webinar. So we, we thank you
I don't know what you're
for
talking about. 10 minutes is plenty.
10 minutes is plenty. That's the attitude we like. That's the attitude we like. And I was about to say, hope you didn't drop everything and run to the webinar because you are a very new father. So
Yeah, very, very new. No, luckily, I've got a good partner at home, so she's picking up the slack on that respect.
excellent, excellent. Well, congratulations
Thank you, mate.
on your
Appreciate it.
addition. We'll obviously be coming to you just in a very, very short space of time and explain the brief 10 minutes that you had to come in. And of course, let me welcome, of course, Brenda. Not just the better half of my relationship, but of course a
Yeah,
very, very important member of the Prop Funders team and lives it and breathes it, the ups and downs with me. So how are you, Brenda, today?
fine, fine. Just waiting for the spring weather to pick up and be a bit better and give us a bit of vitamin D. I think we all need a bit of vitamin D at the minute, so
Yeah,
I could do with
I,
some of that. Yeah.
I don't think you're wrong in that. So,
Mm.
okay, so just literally as a 1 minute before we go on to Will, and I think what'll be some exciting things that we'll share. But we always like to start with this little bit of market sort of overview. And well, the key things are on the screen there in terms of house prices. Annual growth is steady. National stability, probably mass a little bit of regional divergence. Um, Interest rates there. I'm sure most are familiar with that. Um, Brenda, anything jump out at you in terms of preparing for
You,
this?
if you listen to the news at the minute, there's obviously issues around globally around the world, and you would tend to think that that's going to have an effect on the market. You're going to think, oh, rates are going to drop, inflation's going to go through the roof. It hasn't at the minute, so things are quite stable. That's probably the key takeaway. There hasn't been a huge push into the market, and probably you can see things like stock is at 11-year high, which is quite good for buyers. And that hasn't been the case for a long time. There was a demand for stock, but on the back of that, you also still have the issues with builders not being able to build enough homes, and Will knows all about that from the land profit side because the whole planning issue, and that's what they're trying to address to get more homes onto the market. And they'll probably talk about that in a minute, but um, it is quite strange still this regional picture that we're getting that London and the southeast have not maybe come out of the slump that they were in, or it's maybe a case of developers are moving out of London, seeing better opportunities and realizing that actually I can go elsewhere. There is money to be made elsewhere. And again, Will's probably going to maybe slightly mention that about their next project coming up as well, which is not in the south or in London. So I'm just giving them a good secure into the
A good key up.
yeah.
What one
Mhm.
thing that Brenda, we had a bit of a friendly spat over as we're
Yeah,
preparing the
only
slides.
that friendly.
Um, that those that know me would know I would never argue with anybody
Never wrong.
or be
Never.
confrontational.
Mm.
But the amount of different lenders offering mortgages in the market and the different options. I mean, you have there's about 7,000 different options for mortgages at the minute. How many lenders did you reckon was in the market?
I think about 350 odd or 370. Obviously not just traditional banks because there's, as you said, only about 150 banks, but you do have other financial institutions that are able to offer mortgage products on top of that. So I suppose it multiplies up, but there, there may not be the rates, may not be the best at the minute, but there are quite a lot of products still out there.
Yeah, and I noticed there that the top of the leaderboard in terms of increase has been actually Northern Ireland,
yes,
9.5%, which is great.
I think yes, they were finally waking up that we're not too bad over here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, you obviously obviously professional in this space. Any sort of observations on what's on the screen from your own sort of experience or dealing in the market?
I think the regarding the property market at the moment, there is an increase in the stock, which is obviously great, but there is always a lag with regards to new build stock. And it's not too difficult, or it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize why. The red tape and the kind of political influences on planning, even small scale planning, which is, in the grand scheme of things, us here at Land Profits, we are predominantly a small scale promoter at this moment in time. We're expanding into larger developments, but we typically look at are typically looking at your sub affordable threshold schemes. So we're not talking 100, 200, 300 units yet. We're talking about 5, 10, 15 units, and even those are incredibly hard to get through, and it doesn't take too much brain power to think, well, if you're struggling to get those through, those bigger ones must be even harder. So from a value perspective, and the way that the interest rates are affecting us further down the chain on land sales, it's development finance is still expensive, but that's been, in my opinion, relatively stable for probably 6 to 12 months now. You're probably sitting at around, to correct me if I'm wrong, probably around 9 to 11% sort of as far as development finance goes, which is always a bone of contention when trying to sell a site. It's a case of, well, the finance is costing me £500,000 in interest, so we're always looking at that and keeping an eye on it. But it seems more stable, especially I was expecting, given what Mr. Trump is doing over the pond, I was expecting there to be a little bit of a fluctuation this month, more so than perhaps we've actually probably seen, which is actually quite encouraging, because I think people are realizing that the world does keep turning, and all right, it's costing me a bit more to get to the office because of the petrol, but other than that, I think it's relatively stable from our perspective.
Yeah, and it'll change again almost as quickly. There'll be a peace deal at some point, and everything will go back to normalization. So, okay, brilliant. No, thanks for your observation. So, look, let's get straight into this first segment, and really, this is what I suppose we get into property for, is the big success stories. We all know it doesn't always work out. We all know that some projects don't go to plan. But what we're doing here now for the next couple of minutes is discussing what we call real lives, real deals. And this is a project that just, I think, a matter of days ago, you concluded completely. And I suppose the headline is it's a planning uplift project. And the gross profit, the project from the profit was £225,000 just on this one project. If that isn't a success story, I'm not sure what is. So could you I should have explained, you were given a 10-minute notice. Ella had hoped to be on today. She's
I was going to say, that's not me in the top left-hand corner. I've not had a haircut.
Yeah, that was pre-fatherhood.
Yeah.
All gone downhill. Yeah.
from there. But Ella found herself in. She may actually be on listening, but she found herself in A&E this morning, needing some stitches. So nothing sort of too dramatic, but does require medical attention. So with 10 minutes to spare, Will got a phone call. Said, "Can you?" To which he said, "Yes."
Of
So
course.
yeah, could you just very quickly give us an idea? This project, how long ago did it start for you? And just some of the key figures around it, and then of course the payout.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, give or take, we're probably approaching a year and a half since we kind of got into this. The project was very, very straightforward, very bread and butter for us. It was two existing properties with garden space, um, where we were solely looking at a backland development with road frontage. There was already an existing access. The space, there was precedent on the other side of the exact same road for exactly what we were looking to plot on there. Planning was as planning goes. As like I said, it's never exactly straightforward, but it was as straightforward as I would expect any application to be. Too many taxes, but that's normal. The site was secured under a straightforward option agreement, but we did have to purchase an existing property as part of the deal. So a slight complication in that regard, but nothing that we haven't done, you know, dealt with before, basically. So we secured the planning consent. I would say it was sort of Q3 last year, I believe. We had a buyer lined up for it pre-approval at an agreed price. That price being just over well, it was 1,075,000 for the site, less some of the unknown costs at the time, for example, Section 106, SIL, and B&G credit cost. We secured the option across the entire site, including the existing property, which you can see there at the bottom, for 1.45. So we had a sort of deficit of 412,000, give or take, after, because we completed and exchanged on the sale of the land at just a a shade over 1,035,000. And we then sold the property at auction for give or take 640,000, which then nets out to about 1,675,000, which then gives us the 225 grand gross.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, that, to be fair, is, I don't say as good as it gets, but that is exactly like a textbook planning uplift project, in terms of
Literally,
timeline.
it's exactly what we look to get. It's exactly what we look to secure. It's the exact, save of the house inclusion in it. It was an extremely straightforward sale process. There was a number of people interested in the development from a land perspective. And eventually there was a lot of local builders and developers looking at the property from an uplift perspective, because we were selling it competitively, because we were able to, because we secured it at the right price on the way. So we knew what our figures were on the way in going for the land. So we weren't concerned by paying 1.45 for the site at all. We knew that there was always a decent uplift in it. Hence the profit on the screen.
Yeah. And remind me, what was the actual cost of planning?
So the actual cost of planning was, give or take, with some change either side, it was about £45,000.
Go ahead, Brendan.
And that was for four. That was for four units. That was for two pairs of semis.
Is that would that be part of your strategy normally? I know you had to buy the existing house on Clay Hill. Is it normally part of your strategy to go to auction, or was that something you thought, well, this will be the fastest way to move this on? Or did you have contacts? What was the thinking behind moving it at auction?
So we because of the timelines we negotiated on the contract, we had a little bit of time to play with. So towards the end of last year, in the lead up to Christmas, we gave it an 8-week marketing campaign with a local agent on the market at a price which we thought was competitive. But we always knew that if it hadn't sold come Christmas Day, that we would be looking to the new year at an auction route, solely because of the ease of being able to line up the contracts. Obviously, as we all know on this call, once the hammer goes down, it's under contract.
Yeah.
And we can it's the easiest way for us to align the sale of the property with the back-to-back simultaneous completion of our option. Because also you got to think as well, we've got a lot of parties involved here. We've got 2 landowners, each of which have their respective option and their respective payments to be made. We've got the land at the back. We've got the buyer for the land. We've got ourselves, and we've got the buyer for the house. So we had to legally align all of them to complete on the same day. And for the house, it was the last piece of the puzzle. So auction was always the kind of best route for us. And we were in a good position that we had enough in the deal to be able to put it up at a price that would sell at auction, because obviously we know that you typically achieve less at auction than you do if you do a full marketing campaign, right?
Yeah.
But you lose in price, you gain in certainty,
speed,
and speed.
So
yeah, we quite literally we exchanged and dropped the hammer on that literally last week. So that's and we're due to complete, I think it's on the 29th of this month, so money in the bank. So yeah, we're chuffed.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And it just shows how it can be done, which is why you're in the game you're in, to deliver on that stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do, actually, we've sort of hastily arranged, because this all already only broke the last couple of days. So next Tuesday, Ella is going to come on and join a special webinar where we're going to be running through this project in more detail to let people see the start to finish, the ups and downs, the frustrations, but then ultimately a tremendous outcome of £225,000 profit, which is fantastic. And you obviously do have other projects. We're obviously working with yourselves, and I know you've got other projects coming up that funding will be required for.
Yeah, we've got a lot in the pipeline coming up. Stuff that we've got under option at the moment. We've got another planning submission going in on Friday. We've got 4 or 5 kind of live ones that we're discussing with local councils up and down the country. We've got 3 sites which are available to be purchased at the moment that we're discussing disposals on. So yeah, we're busy.
Yeah, fantastic. So if anyone wants to, Brenda, how can people get on? Just what's on the screen there?
The QR code will take you to the link to register for the webinar, or alternatively, you have the bit.ly link down the bottom. Just type that in and that'll let you register then for the webinar for Tuesday. And it should be very interesting, and hopefully I'll be back fighting fit again with this.
I'm sure she will, and if she won't, then you'll be seeing my face again, I suspect.
I was going to say, hopefully more than 10-minute notice. Maybe you'll be standing with baby in tow.
Yeah.
And
that will be the case.
Yeah. So listen, well, really appreciate you coming on at short notice, and I think it's fantastic to be able to share with our community a really good success story. So I know you do have to drop off and get on with what you had already planned to do from 1 to 2. So a massive thanks from me and Brenda for joining, and we can let you drop off and we'll get on with the rest now.
That's all right. No worries. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate it. I'll speak to you both soon.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate that.
Take care.
Best night. Bye. So there we are. Absolutely fantastic. Be able to bring on a story like that, and a success story. Again, really keen to hear any comments in the Q&A. If you have any questions around that project specifically, fire it in now, and we can ask it on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Or if you want to even just comment on what you've seen, please stick it into the Q&A, and we'll be very happy to look at that. So the main topic for this week, or this month, should I say, this monthly webinar was around latest changes within the FCA and the tightening up of the whole activity of raising funds, financial promotions, etc. So I know, Brenda, this is something that is close to your heart, given sort of in your previous background of working with a crowdfunding platform as the point of contact with the FCA principal. So you kind of lived and breathed regulation, financials, and promotions
yeah. Mm-hmm.
for quite a few years. So
it's not the most exciting topic. It's not the most glamorous topic. It's probably, and whenever it comes to property, it's the part that everybody sort of goes, oh, but it is probably one of the most important topics. And if I start from bottom up, the FCA even, are now they're scrutinizing the market more. Whether they're using AI tools to do that, it's a possibility. So it's much easier for them to find out who's promoting investments in the wrong way. I know there's other slides that we'll talk about in a few minutes about people that have been caught on and have been prosecuted for it. But big changes would have been February 2024, where they introduced the Section 21 gateway, and then that became a regulation that said that only authorized firms could approve. Sorry, I'll start again. The authorized firms used to be able to approve financial promotions for their clients. That basically was done away with under this new regime, and only certain firms that have been granted specific approval permission by the FCA can now sign off on financial promotions. That the number then of these firms that have this approval permission is quite small. So it's literally brought the financial promotions down to a very few select number of firms, which means then it's obviously easier for the FCA to monitor and to check up on and to ensure that the promotions are being, the financial promotions are being done in the correct way. I don't know if it's completely got rid of everybody who is promoting in a bad way, if that makes sense, but it probably makes it easier for the FCA to monitor. I think is probably the main focus on that.
Yeah,
but,
I think the way
it is
the way
a big change.
The way I describe it, Brenda, is really it's the sort of the noose is tightening to an extent. The parameters of what you can and can't do is contracting, and therefore it allows the FCA to have greater scrutiny on how they do things. And again, it's not just about being clear. Now there's more onus on making sure that you prove that your promotion leads to good outcomes, and it has fair value.
Yes.
So it's just the bar just keeps getting higher and higher, and the Section 21 gateway really has brought some clarity to who can and who can't approve financial promotions.
Yeah, and it's maybe a case of two, though. Yes, I know there were bad players in the market, and I know there were people that were inciting people to invest without any background information, without any due diligence, without any scrutiny on them as the people that were being invested into. But I think in some ways it's almost like this sledgehammer to crack a nut. You have a smaller number of bad players, but because they couldn't control the bad players, let's just gather up everybody into one basket and we'll just tie a knot on it and throw it away. And it means then that investment has become so regulated that it almost makes it difficult for the good players, if you want, from that terminology, to be able to offer investments that are good. And it's this term, is this probably the looking at investments and deciding what is good and what is bad. And because they couldn't sort of say, yeah, well, you can do this or not do that, they just decided, no, nobody's really going to be allowed to invest. And I don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think it's good for the economy. And I think it's why we see the economy struggling now, because a lot of people have just pulled back, and there's not the money being made, there's not the freedom to be able to go out and do investments and use your own brain basically to say, yes, I like this, and yes, I'm happy enough to do this. It's almost like a nanny state in some ways too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been a couple of comments come in that our sound isn't great. I think someone's
Okay.
commenting here that a bit of an echo. So I don't know if that's just a bit of an internet glitch on our side, but perhaps if anyone else
Could
can
be.
even just put something into the Q&A or the chat, if you confirm you're hearing us okay, or whether there is an ongoing sound difficulty, that would be very helpful if people could stick it in either to the chat or the Q&A for us. But we better move on swiftly here, Brenda, if you keep an eye on, see if anyone comments on the overall sound.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what happened back in 2024, Section 21, etc., was sort of a big step forward, but literally, and what we're highlighting on this webinar today is that just in January past, there's been another change where the FCA has introduced what they're referring to as public offer platforms. So public offer platforms, and really POPs as they're known. This is designed to facilitate capital raising for private companies by allowing them to offer securities, i.e. equity and debt, to the general public via one of these registered public offer platforms. And this, in a way, is actually replacing the historical requirement for a full FCA approved prospectus when raises got to a certain level, and replacing that expensive, cumbersome, lengthy FCA approval of a prospectus, and replacing that with a much simpler disclosure document. So this is clearly about allowing more people in the market, be they high net worth retail or sophisticated, to be able to access equity and debt offers. So this certainly, Brenda, has just what you were saying about the economy. This has the potential to allow more funds to be deployed into this type of investment.
Definitely, yes. But obviously a higher threshold. It's not necessarily for the SMEs and the smaller guys that are maybe looking funds. It would be anyone looking in the 5 million plus, as you mentioned. But it is interesting that I think I said this before, that the regulation probably will come full circle at some point where it gets so restricted that nobody's moving, there's no investment, there's no money being made, there's no funds being deployed that the government can tax. So eventually they'll go, hold on a minute here, we're not making any money. So the strings will loosen again, and the new regulation will come out then that'll change it up again. But who knows?
Yeah. I thought it would just be useful to very quickly highlight the journey that the FCA would take to introducing this type of a change. And you can see along the bottom there, back in January 25, they launched a consultation paper or consultation process. That was left open then for a few months, and then it closed in March. They then issued a policy statement in July. And then from that policy statement came the new regime, which came into force then in the 19th of January 26. So a year really there of consultation, engaging with stakeholders, hearing feedback, then going away and making their new policy statement. And then obviously it then becomes force. So for anyone who wants to, you can go on and look there, July 25. There's, I think from memory, it's about 171 pages if you really want to try and read through it all. But it's quite comprehensive. But I do think it points to a significant change in this market, and certainly in the world of crowdfunding, allows for crowdfunding platforms to more easily raise larger sums of money, which I think is very interesting.
The other point maybe on some of the documentation, that the policy papers, that the FCA put out. Anyone can comment on it. You can go in at any time and leave your comments on it. The startling fact is, though, some of these laws, they put it out to consultation and they may only get 50 to 70 people replying to them. And on that basis, they tend to change the laws. So, you know, I know they're using internal knowledge and what have you too, and people within the organization and their policymakers, but if they're relying just solely on people's opinions, it's not an awful lot of, not a big spectrum basically that they refer to.
Okay, so we've just got a couple more slides and then we're wrapping up. You know, we really do appreciate your time to be joining here live. In terms of just clarifying, Brenda, on so how do firms promote an investment opportunity? Some of the things you've highlighted there is, you know, 15-second TikTok sort of ad or promo requires the same disclosure as a 50-page brochure. Once it's a financial promotion, then the regulations kick in, and there are very clear things that are required. You mentioned earlier about influencers. Just speak to that for a moment, please.
Yes, well, obviously, you had paid influencers, or finfluencers as they're called, promoting financial products within TikTok, Instagram, short videos that they were putting up, and they were promoting, I believe it was a Forex trading, and the FCA charged 6 of them, fined them anywhere between, I think, 800 to 900 up to 3, 4, 5,000 pounds per person for promoting these products that were basically against financial promotion rules. So they are cracking down. If you're not following the rules, if you're not an approved company where you're authorized by an approved company to promote the product, then you can't do it, basically.
Yeah, and the Financial Times had a really good article on that. I think actually it was 9 individuals in the end were charged, which is again quite interesting. It doesn't always hit the headlines, but it does show you how serious this can be if you're out on social media and you're looking to raise funds. And I still see it. I still see developers on LinkedIn, you know, looking for private investors. And we'll talk in a minute about some of the mistakes that are made. But I mean, just completely breaking financial promotion rules. And so that's fine. We'll just quickly remind people that they have these 3 buckets: the FCA, and just high net worth sophisticated. Like most people on the call will know that. Self-certified sophisticated investors and restricted investors, and really particularly restricted investor promotion is where the FCA really have an interest, and where you have to make sure that you have got your financial promotions approval in line. High net worth sophisticated, Brenda, there's obviously more freedom to speak to those people privately, not online, but privately once they have been certified, because they're of an investment experience that the FCA feel, well, they're better informed, make up their mind if they want to invest or not. But they are the three buckets. So what should people look out for, Brenda, on social media? How would you know if a post is financial promotions approved and therefore legitimate versus a cowboy who is effectively breaking the law as they try and raise funds?
Okay, well, first thing first is risk warnings have to be prominent. And on this example that you have here, it's the first thing you see at the top of the image. And it'll also be included in the text as well. Another thing that you will notice is the approver reference, which is an FRN number, and that will have the approver reference and the date included. So that's the date it was approved on. Another thing to note is the image has to be standalone compliant, not just the text. So you can put risk warnings in your text. You can say, you can not mention investment in your text, but if you have invest now all over your image and guaranteed returns, then your image is not compliant. Both sides need to be compliant, not just the text, which is something people tend to miss a lot.
Yeah. So we would certainly encourage people, if they're not sure, have a look for an approver number, because that's part of the new regime, is that every post on social media that's trying to induce an investment or make a financial promotion must have the approver number on the promotion material, so it can be tracked back to who was the FCA principal that actually signed it off. So they were just an example.
Sorry, a big thing with the promotions is that the person that has approved it, the approver person, has to make sure that the post stays compliant throughout its life cycle. So if someone went back in and edited this post and put something completely different in there to say guaranteed returns, this is, asset backed and all of this sort of thing, and they had changed the text on that, the approver must check back and ensure that that post stays compliant for as long as it's visible on platforms. Just Brilliant. To throw that in there.
Yeah. Okay. So the last slide on this, and then we'll wrap up. But again, here what I call some red flags. So if you want, Brenda, I'll read out what very often people say, and you can respond with the compliant way of saying it. So sometimes you'll read on an ad, guaranteed 10% returns.
It's almost, you will only ever say possible or potential returns of 10%, and your capital is at risk. Returns are not guaranteed. It's a high risk investment. You may not get your money back. So those are sort of the risk warnings that you should look for.
Again, you'll see quite often social media, safe as houses, beats the bank, asset-backed security.
Yeah, you can say this is backed by property, but values can fall. There's no guarantee that the past performance will continue on to be held over to the future.
Yeah. One that is very prominent sometimes, this sort of fear of loss, hurry up, only 24 hours left to invest, almost full, tranche almost full, creating a real fear of loss.
Yeah, it's basically all you can do really is state a fact, is say that the current funding round closes on January 1st, but that's it. You can't say act now, the current funding round closes. It's literally just stating the fact of when the project's going to end.
Yeah. Tax-free profits through our structure.
Again, this one is probably, obviously tax is always dependent on the circumstance, but what you should look for is someone saying we don't offer tax advice, and we're not, go seek your own advice, independent advice. That's what you should always do.
Yeah. Or an ad that just doesn't have a prominent risk warning, or it may be hidden some way.
You should be looking for that probably pretty early on, even in your information memorandums and any documentation you get. You should look for the risk warning, because then that shows that the people who are sending the information are aware that there's risks, and you're aware that there's risks. So that's something you should always look out for.
Brilliant. Okay, Brenda, thank you very much for that. Just wrapping up then, remind people who aren't aware of our podcast channel, the Property Funding Podcast. You have a whole bunch of guests from all different journeys within property. One of the last ones we did, actually very timely, was with Angus Griffin, an ex-FCA enforcement officer, no less. And he, one of his quotes is property investors are going to jail for this. And he very aptly explains the rules. And yes, it's important to know the rules, but the rules aren't designed to stop people doing business. Sometimes people think that the whole point of the FCA regulation is to stop people investing or to stop developers raising funds, and that isn't the case, even though it may feel that way. It's about saying, here is the legal, legitimate way to do it. And Angus goes into that very well and explains the psyche of why the FCA makes some of the decisions they do and put some of the policies in place that they do. So I really encourage you to go on. And if anyone fancies being a guest on the podcast as well, reach out to us. It's a very interesting journey when you sit down with someone and get their life story, as well as what they've done in property. Sometimes it's phenomenal success. Other times there's been huge problems. You can see one guy there, lost over $1 million when a company collapsed. That's a difficult story, but the guest is willing to talk through that. So really good opportunity to learn more as well. So our mission statement then within PropFundrs is very much about saving property developers and investors time and money by structuring, sourcing, and simplifying property funding. And hopefully today you've got value out of trying to simplify the world of regulation and compliance so that you understand it better, which then hopefully, whether you're a developer or an investor, helps you do business better. If you do want to reach out to us, you can book a free 15-minute call. Happy to answer any questions. If something's sort of tweaked your curiosity from the call today, then by all means, there's a QR code, bit.ly link. You can get on there, book a call with us, and very happy to have a conversation with you. And if that's all you need is a 15-minute chat, no problem. If it develops into some of our services that we offer within PropFundrs, very happy to have that conversation. And that is us for today. So anything, Brenda, we've missed out, we will be letting everyone know our next, we're landing up a very special guest for next month. Hasn't been 100% confirmed, so we haven't divulged it today, but third Wednesday of the month. So we have third Wednesday in May.
Yeah, 21st.
21st. Okay.
20th, I think. Hold on. I'll get it right now. 20th. Almost right.
20th of May will be our next webinar. And again, we will be sticking this recording up on a YouTube channel very quickly. I'll just, if anyone wants to make any last minute comment, feel free to stick something into the Q&A. And feeling that we can almost head up. So anything else, Brenda, before we finish?
No, we've just bamboozled everybody with the very complex. Trying to fit it all into half an hour. It's probably rather difficult, but it is what it is.
No, it's important stuff, and I know you're passionate about it, and it's what we do in this business is make sure that developers understand what they can and can't do, and that's a very important thing to happen in the market. And it's always great when you've got a guest on who is able to show a £225,000 profit in one project. And again, if you haven't already, Tuesday night, 7 p.m, join us, and Ella and maybe Will as well. We'll both talk you through the project. So listen, thanks so much for today. Really appreciate it. Until next month, take care. All the best. Bye-bye.